The story begins with a Korean man named Sunjae, who escaped from the pursuit of the Mafia in the Philippines. Which turns out Sunjae had run away from the headquarters of online gambling because he was forced to work continuously without getting a salary and tortured continuously. Sunjae then meets up with two Filipino policemen for help, but a hitman named Kanji arrives and slaughters them, including the two policemen. The story then shifts to Korea, where our brutal protagonist named Sokdo is dealing with a case of buying and selling illegal drugs. And at that time they and their team managed to catch some dealers who tried to circulate illegal drugs in an alley. After that they also managed to find the headquarters of illegal drug dealers, and when it will be raided, it turns out that the room is installed an iron fence so that these dealers immediately throw away all the evidence of illegal drugs when Sokdo and friends come. But a very strong Sokdo tried to damage the iron bars there, which turned out to be Sokdo managed to do it quickly. They all immediately tried to catch the dealers who tried to fight back. Sokdo and his team then managed to find evidence of an application used to buy and sell illegal drugs under the guise of food messages. And soon one of the mobile phones got an order. Soon they managed to trap the buyers, and they managed to catch a lot of illegal drug buyers in the place. That night, Sokdo and his friends managed to find the identity of the application maker, who turned out to be Sunjae. Sokdo gets word that Sunjae's body will be autopsied tomorrow and he is killed while in the Philippines. The next day Sokdo also saw Sunjae's body and there were puncture marks, and found strangeness because Sunjae had lost weight so drastically that Sokdo concluded that Sunjae had died not because of an ordinary robbery. After that, Sokdo meets Sunjae's mother and he gets information that Sunjae went to the Philippines because he got a job offer at a company. But in fact Sunjae cheated and forced to work at an online gambling site. The story then shifts to a wealthy man named Chandal. And he is the owner of the online gambling site where Sunjae works, as well as the owner of the largest online gambling site in the Philippines. On the other hand, Sokdo and his team get information about Sunjae, how he made the app before. But the police did not manage to find the company called by Mrs. Sunjae because at the time of contact is always connected to someone else. But soon Sokdo gets news that Sunjae's mother has died by suicide, which is caused by depression because her son has died. When he came to Mrs. Sunjae's house, Sokdo got a note made by Mrs. Sunjae. If he wants the man who killed his son to be punished. Of course, seeing that, Sokdo feels pity and is determined to catch Sunjae's killer. The story moves. Kanji, who found gambling sites owned by others in the Philippines, so that he and his men intend to finish them off. Long story short, Changi had arrived at the scene and quickly he and his men slaughtered all the mafia there with just a knife. In the end, Kanji managed to take data from his rival's gambling site, and after that Kanji, who worked for Chandal, reported the results of his work if he had obtained data from gambling players and charged Chandal's promise to give him a profit share. But in fact Chandal still did not keep his promise and asked Kanji to add more gambling members, so that Chandal's gambling site was getting crowded. On the other hand, it seems that Sokdo and his friends are having a hard time and ask for help from the cyber team to investigate the case. Sure enough, shortly thereafter the arrival of their cyber team managed to find a gambling site where Sunjae worked. Sokdo and his superiors then go to the gangster headquarters to seek information. But once there, Sokdo is confronted by guards. But as usual, Sokdo managed to defeat them alone. Sokdo then enlists the help of the gangsters to find information about someone who has been in the business world of online casinos or online gambling. It turns out that the person in question is an old friend of Sokdo named Jang Yiso. Sokdo then meets him and asks Yiso to come to the police station. Yiso initially refuses because the last time he helped Sokdo he nearly died. But Sokdo keeps insisting that Yiso has no other choice. Meanwhile, Changi tried to collect back the revenue share promised by Chandal. But again Chandal reasoned that made Changi upset and decided to go to Korea to meet Chandal directly. Arriving at the police station, Yiso also said that he had an online gambling business in the Philippines. But one of the gambling sites owned by Chandal turned out to monopolize the online gambling market in the Philippines, and new gambling sites in the Philippines will be destroyed by Chandal's men. But luckily Yiso knew where to take Sokdo to get more information. Long story short, Yeso was asked to go undercover and play gambling in a casino. Yeso also looks to spend a lot of money and like a very rich person. Until finally someone offered Yeso to play more profitable gambling. When the sales explained the site, Yeso accidentally slipped until finally the sales tried to escape. But luckily Sokdo was on standby and managed to catch the sales. After that Sokdo tries to interrogate the salesperson. Where is the location of the person who sent him? At first he did not want to confess until he was threatened and finally told who his boss was. The next day the person in question sees sales came from the Philippines, let's call him Chen. Sokdo and Changi had passed each other at the airport. However, Sokdo is still unaware that the person in front of him is the perpetrator of Sunjae's murder. Sokdo and his friends followed Chen from behind until Chen finally entered a clothing store. Sokdo's two colleagues try to search, but unfortunately they are both caught. Chen immediately ran away. Luckily Sokdo was already waiting behind, and in the end Chen managed to be taken to the police station for interrogation. When he arrived at the police station, Chen did not want to confess because he was afraid that if he told everyone he would be killed. Meanwhile, on the other side, Changgi has arrived at Changdul's remote villa to collect his promise. But instead of fulfilling Changdul's promise, he offered Changgi a larger fee. Changdul intends to create a cryptocurrency. But to make it happen the process is a little bit long. So Changgi was asked to accompany his secretary to bribe representatives of digital currency exchanges so that Changdul's cryptocurrency could be official quickly. Of course, hearing that Changgi also agreed. That night the secretary tried to bribe the representative of the cryptocurrency exchange. But he refused because it is very risky, until finally Changgi was fed up directly kill Secretary Kondal as a threat to the deputy. And in the end the threat managed to bribe the representative of the exchange. After succeeding, Changgi got news from Changdal that Chen was arrested by the police, so Changgi was told to finish off Chen. Because if Chen opens his mouth then Changdal can be directly destroyed. The next day Changgi was in front of the police station. And soon a lot of motorcycle taxis that deliver food. But it turned out that these were all fictitious orders. Meanwhile, Changgi immediately launched his action and immediately killed Chen when all the police took care of fictitious orders. The night of the secretary's death is heard by Changdal, and he makes plans with his colleague Quan to dispose of his secretary's body. The next day the secretary's body is found in a container, and based on the autopsy results Sokdo finds out if the secretary's death was due to a puncture, and the puncture was the same as Singji before. Which means the secretary was killed by the same person. Meanwhile, Changgi returned to collect Changdal's promise. But Changdal again reasoned that Changgi intended to meet him, making Changdal a little restless and asked Quan to tighten security. Long story short, the inauguration day of Changdul's cryptocurrency was held in a building. Seokdo, who knows the information about the secretary, intends to see Changdu. But while in the elevator, Seokdo accidentally encounters Changgi, which makes the situation in the elevator very tense. Out of suspicion, Seokdo and his partner followed Changgi from behind, and sure enough Changgi and his men immediately attacked them both in different places. But take it easy, even though Seokdo was ganged up on, he managed to defeat his enemy without a hitch. Unfortunately fellow Sokdo lost, and Changgi managed to escape. He also killed an office boy there. Long story short, Sokdo gets Segangi identity, who turned out to be a former special forces who got into a lot of trouble and was eventually released to coincide with the emergence of Changdul's gambling site. Meanwhile, the state of Office Boy has begun to improve. And one of Changgi's men who did not want to give information was tortured by Sokdo to talk. Soon after, Sokdo is summoned by his superiors and he is relieved of his duties on the case because there is still no progress. Plus there were civilian casualties while investigating the case. Of course, this made Sokdo very disappointed because he had promised himself to catch Sunjae's killer according to the contents of the letter from Sunjae's mother who committed suicide. Annoyed, Sokdo vents his anger to the thugs who are rioting in the area where he is resting. On the other hand, Changdal asks Quan for help to finish off Changgi because his attitude is out of control because he is afraid that Changdal will be Changgi's next target. Long story short, Quan and his men reached Changgi's place, but apparently Changgi was not afraid at all, and at the end of his very brutal fight was inevitable. Changgi, who was only 2 with his colleagues, managed to defeat Quan's men who were quite a number without remaining. Quan, who was cornered, finally had to obey Changgi's words. The next day Sokdo is still trying to investigate the case. Even he was willing to kneel in front of his boss who was in a meeting in order to continue his case. Luckily the police chief is also there and finally allows Sokdo to continue solving the case. Aware that the perpetrators monopolize the online gambling market, Sokdo has a plan to trap the perpetrators by opening a new online gambling site in the Philippines. That way the police will be easy to catch the culprit. But before that Sokdo needs someone's help to carry out his plan, which is none other than Yeso. Of course Yeso refuses to help Sokdo anymore because he has to risk his life to help. Moreover, there was no reward for him at all. Sokdo then gives the badge as a high-ranking special agent, and if Yeso wears it then he officially becomes a police officer. Hearing this, Yeso immediately agreed to help. At the police station they have prepared the necessary service so that the plan runs smoothly. After that, some colleagues Sokdo and Yeso asked to go to the Philippines to build a new online gambling place. Long story short, Yeso and some Korean police have arrived in the Philippines. They quickly immediately built a large enough online gambling place and there are few problems. But luckily Yeso has solved it easily. After all, they just started running their online gambling sites. Meanwhile, on the other hand, Chongdal is very happy because Kwon managed to catch Chonggi and he was given a gun to finish off Chonggi with his own hands. But unfortunately Chongdal got fooled because Chonggi was not tied at all and the gun Kwon gave him had no bullets anymore. He has provided the code for all his gambling servers. Because he already got the code, Chonggi immediately cut off Chongdul's fingers so that he could open his safe. After that, Kwon and his men were tasked to finish him off. Sure enough, Chonggi got a report if there was a new site and he immediately told his men to finish it off. Meanwhile, Chonggi himself will go to Chongdul's residence to retrieve the contents of his safe. On the other hand, the Korean and Philippine police were already preparing for the arrival of the perpetrators when they came. The police immediately gave smoke bombs and in the end the police managed to arrest the perpetrators very easily. Besides, the police managed to find Kanji's online gambling center in the Philippines. At the same time, they also managed to find a gambling server at Chongdul's residence. Quickly Sokdo and the other police in Korea rushed to Chongdul's house. There it turns out that Kwon and his men are still there and are trying to attack Sokdo. However, Sokdo managed to defeat them all and get information about Chonggi's whereabouts. Sokdo immediately went alone to the airport and it was known that Chonggi and his partner would go back to the Philippines. Meanwhile, Sokdo, who almost reached the airport, only had 10 minutes before the plane's departure, but luckily the plane's departure was delayed because there was an emergency. And Sokdo himself finally managed to reunite with Chonggi and also his partner. Without much ado they immediately fought. And Sokdo has to face two people at once. But it turns out that Sokdo is still able to fight. Because a Chonggi without a knife is nothing but an ordinary person. They were both made by the father. And in the end Sokdo managed to overthrow Chonggi's friends. After that, Chonggi used a broken knife. Because he got the knife, Sokdo was overwhelmed because of Chonggi's expertise in using knives. But even so, Sokdo is still not deterred and his adrenaline rises, making Sokdo finally manage to defeat Chonggi. After that, Sokdo got out of the plane while his superiors just came with reinforcements. Long story short, Sokdo and his police colleagues paid tribute to Sunjae's mother. And Sokdo has kept his promise to punish the perpetrator. Meanwhile, on the other hand, Yeso got a police ticket and when he showed the police badge, it turned out that the badge was the badge of the American Food Supervisory Agency. Which of course it makes Yesu upset because all this time has been cheated by Sokdo. And after that the film ends.